Electric vehicles promise to reshape how we get from point A to point B.
The electric car is here.
They're supposed to rebuild the environment, drastically reducing tailpipe emissions.
Model year 2027 passenger vehicles, 43, so nearly half of all the new vehicles sold in New Mexico must be zero-emission vehicles.
Last year, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham issued a green challenge to New Mexico, announcing strict guidelines in line with California on new auto sales. Little more than a year from now, 43% of new vehicles shipped to our state need to be zero emission. Just 6 years later, in 2032, that requirement clamps down tighter to 80%.
The average EV market share is hovering just below 4%. So we're supposed to go from 4% to 43% in about 16 months when we've only increased it by 1% the last 3 years. It's just unattainable.
Ken Ortiz at the New Mexico Auto Dealers Association speaks for almost 150 sellers across our state. Ortiz believes an electric vehicle mandate like this isn't practical for most dealers or drivers outside of large cities like Albuquerque.
What about our tribal neighbors? Let's say the Navajo Nation. You know, there's miles and miles of unpaved roads. Some of the houses there do not have electricity to power their homes. They're just not going to have choices, which leads New Mexicans to leave out of state to purchase their vehicles of choice.
We are in the process of running paperwork.
Okay, that sounds great, Lydia. Did you end up getting new or used?
Sabrina Fitzgerald is the executive sales lead at Rich Ford. Electric vehicles make up a decent portion of her transactions.
Your brakes last longer, so it's just, in general, just a better way to go. It's evolutionary, so I'm a huge proponent of EV and hybrid.
She says some of the most unlikely car buyers end up driving away in an EV, many of them motivated by federal tax credits. One client jumped from a gas vehicle straight to an electric F-150.
The fact that he adapted so quickly to it, and then just seeing him on the test drive and watching his eyes light up, and he drove it, he was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I was like, yeah. He's like, it's incredibly comfortable. And I even made him drive a Tremor F-150 like afterwards just to double check.
Sabrina says EV converts like that are usually hesitant to rely on an underdeveloped charging network. The range anxiety holds way too many drivers back.
To make sure that rural New Mexico's needs will be met with that initial influx of funding.
NMDOT says it works closely with federal and private industry partners, all to close the gaps in our charging network. Right now, the counties shaded in the darkest blue have the most chargers.
We designated the first round of funding to our interstates.
A legislative report details the plan to create a high-voltage network for EV drivers, especially in our rural and tribal communities. Those see historically lower EV ownership numbers due to fewer charging options. The report explains just how far behind New Mexico is. You can see that we're well behind the curve with only half the number of chargers we should have for a state our size. Truckloads of EVs are headed to New Mexico soon. The question remains whether demand will keep up.
We're prepared to offer the vehicle of choice, whatever that is, at the price that they can afford. We just oppose the government trying to tell New Mexicans what they should be driving.
It's going to take so many more chargers in our state to convince drivers it's time to make the switch. These chargers here at ABQ Uptown are still wrapped up, ready to hit the grid sometime soon. This is just the beginning of the power shift coming to New Mexico roads. I'm Hawker Vanguard.